Hello and welcome to Thinking Out Loud. I'm your co-host Nathan Rittenhouse.
And I'm your co-host, Cameron McAllister.
We're going to talk about marijuana, and you're like, "Oh, come on, Mom, we don't need this." But just
It's
hear
the
us out
talk,
for
okay? Just sit down,
yeah,
son.
it's
Just kidding.
for just split second.
Yeah.
Um, Cameron, we we came of age at an interesting time in this conversation, but um, recently I've just been struck by a number of articles. Several weeks ago, the New York Times ran a series, one of people complaining, just pointing out, like, okay, America has a marijuana use issue. One of those was looking at kind of the social fabric of what it's like to try to walk through a city these days. And yeah, you're always going to have your people who are kind of complaining about that. But, the New York Times isn't really like the bastion of conservative thought. So that's notable that there was a lot of commentary on conversation there. Then the next week, I think it was, they ran an article that was, and these are like medical journals saying that there isn't actually scientifically measurable benefit to acute pain relief from medical marijuana, that there just really isn't any there as far as possible studies. And yes, I know immediately everybody has their own anecdotal thing and they're like, yep, we get that, but we're just saying, if we're looking at the numbers
hmm
and our modern scientific understanding, uh there's a lot to be desired. I
hmm
was thinking about this in a medicinal sense. Then I think it was this week, NPR. So I'm going out of my way to not. I'm not talking about religious fundamentalism. I'm not talking about um, your grandmother's vision on. I'm talking about modern secular people trying to follow the science. I think this was maybe Lancet was saying that there really isn't good evidence for mental health and as a medicinal marijuana as a response to mental health. And in fact, maybe and in each of these are very carefully worded, and they're saying here are some very
hmm
niche and subset, and here are some subcomponents of this that have been studied, and where some types of results have been shown to be as effective as fill in the other alternatives. But by and large, there's a slow consensus emerging that maybe we have oversold ourselves on the actual practical sociological, cultural, and physical health um, benefits of marijuana. Now, I think there's a whole crew of people who are listening, like, yeah, we knew this all along, though. But anyway, it might be too soon to say that this is a movement, but I'm just pointing out that where we currently sit, there are major journalistic publications that are commenting on major medical journals and publications saying the jury is not as conclusive as all the anecdotes that you might hear otherwise from your friends and family.
I'm
What
curious.
do we do with that?
Well, let me play devil's advocate and just have you respond for a second. So what about people who would say this is a healthy alternative to more serious drugs like alcohol? And also, because we can do microdosing, that allows us to keep this, we have a more controlled kind of relationship with this
Yeah.
substance now, that kind of thing. We can use it
So
recreationally.
these articles are specifically talking about the medicinal use of it.
Okay.
So there aren't. There hasn't been a huge thing of like, you know what, 3 beers a night. I drink 3 beers a night for my health.
Sure.
It's the using this. So they're not commenting on other reasons that you might use this. They're just saying that as a medicinal tool,
Mhm.
which was the foundation of a lot of the legalization and decriminalization language. And it's marijuana now. Pick your whatever other chemical, past, present, future, and slot in there. They're just saying if we're actually following the science on the medicinal value here, um, there's no there yet.
One more quick question then, just a brief response. So for a long time, well, not for a long time, but recently, I think it's conceivable that we're going to look at alcohol one day the way we look at cigarettes. That seems to
Hmm.
be
Yeah.
where we are going right now. Alcohol
Well,
sales
does the World Health Organization say like zero drinks are safe?
they
That's
do.
a
They
massive
do, and that's
shift.
massive. Absolutely. So, no biological health benefits to alcohol. Now that said, there is a counter movement. There always is. And some of them are healthcare professionals. I hate the phrase healthcare professional. All right, so i.e., doctors, and some doctors are saying, okay, that's yeah, is there a biological, will this help you biologically? No. But if you take away alcohol from your life, and that means that effectively you subtract a whole slew of social interactions, get-togethers with the
Mhm.
boys or whatever, then that's bad, and that's not healthy for you. So, if you subject it to a more holistic analysis, alcohol actually may, for some, have some social health benefits. So, some people ought to go out there and have a few drinks with their friends. Now, similarly, could somebody what would you say to somebody, Nathan, if and I'm just asking you, I mean, if they said, "Well, there's a lot of psychic pain out there." So, there is physical pain, but there's also psychic pain. And some of these substances, gummies or whatever they are, can help. They help me regulate my mood and they help me,
Mhm.
relax, or they help me get a little bit more creative. They just, it's a great way for me to sort of just enter into a recreational space, blow off steam. What would you, so that's overall, that's kind of good for me, right? I'm just curious how you would respond to that.
Mhm. Yeah, well, and so to back up, these articles are not commenting on that, like the self-medication saying they're saying more on
Sure.
the formal medicinal use side of that. I think so let's use the thought experiment by swapping it out with caffeine. Lots of people would say, "Hey," actually, Michael Pollan wrote an entire book on
You're
the
meddling
power of
now.
the drug
I like
that is
caffeine.
caffeine.
I'm just kidding.
Yeah,
I'm just
well,
kidding. I'm just kidding.
so I'm just saying let's take something else and use it in the same way.
Mhm.
So I know a bunch of people who are like, actually, I don't think it's spiritually healthy for me to be addicted to caffeine. Do I use it? But are there times in which I have to be conscientious about what I'm doing? That I'm saying that that the physical outworking and manifestation of my day, my personality, my mood,
Mhm.
and my interactions with other people are dependent on a chemical. I mean, it's just worth putting out there as a um, stick in whatever other substance you want. I was just picking that one because it's widely accepted as a.
Yep.
I think so. I'm using that to say I think there's a reservation that we ought to have about a whole host of things that the conversation gets broader, not narrower. And this is a type of a thing. Um, that being said, probably the long term physiological, psychological, sociological nature of caffeine isn't one of those that, there's a whole lot of publications out there of like, hey, and this leads to long-term psychosis from overuse
Mhm.
in the same way that some of these other so I think the pushback is are we are we trying to throw a medical blanket over something that we just want to do? And if it's just something like, hey, I just
Sure.
need this, like, let's just call it that.
Mhm.
Let's not act like I'm doing this for my health. That might I think that's the starting point of the conversation.
Yeah, so you think it would be better a more refreshing start to just say, "I wanna get high," instead of
Well,
yeah,
we've talked about this. You know people like that. Yeah,
absolutely.
I
Yeah,
I think the person who just says, "You know what? I had a tough day and I'm so done with this and I don't want to think about reality." I can I can
yeah.
appreciate that more than the person who's like, "Well, this is really important for my and my doctor told me, and I have a prescription for." I'm like, I've known a lot of people who have had prescriptions for a lot of placebos in life.
Well, you were right to I'm gonna go back to what you were saying earlier because it's disturbing. You were right to broaden the conversation. You brought in caffeine. I also think of, people who take a little something to relax on an airplane, here pop an Ambien here or something. I mean, we have but also, think about the role that food plays in many
Oh,
people's lives. This is
absolutely.
an easy place to point. I think, Nathan, I said to you earlier that America is one of the harder working nations in the world. And I say that as an international person. I grew up in Europe. And Americans are always making fun of Europeans for our massive vacations, and you go to plenty of places in Europe and they it's true, they do. They work to live, they don't live to work. But America, part of the one of the glories of this nation is, I've said this before, the resourcefulness, the innovation, the industriousness of Americans. But Americans work so incredibly hard, but they also play so incredibly hard, which is why let's just use the word entertainment to cover a constellation of different recreational practices. Entertainment here is such a behemoth. And so this is a nation where you could have a whole class of now there class is an important actually component of this discussion. We should bring that in a second. But there are whole classes of people who would say, "Yeah, I work really, really hard. I work hard to make the money that I do. I've worked my way up to where I'm at. I do a lot. I take care of my family, and so now I have earned the right to take a little vacation from reality. And that vacation might involve some America, usually it's gonna be some form of indulgence. Maybe you go on an all-inclusive, vacation, or maybe you have a really decadent meal, or maybe you get high, or maybe you get drunk, with your friends. And also, there's that fascinating dimension as well, Nathan, of socially acceptable drugs, because there are some that are still
Oh, yeah.
considered subversive, but you
So
it's a very cultural distinction. I remember a line from Train Spotting where it's about heroin addicts, and one of them goes, "And I've got one Valium, which I've procured from my mother, who is, in her own more socially acceptable way, also a drug addict." To really kind of biting, acidic
well,
line.
so
Yeah.
I was talking to a guy who is recovering opioid
Mhm.
addiction, went through the whole thing. I think Lord did wonderful things, great help, and he's like, "It's wild to me to watch what I went through and then go to a church covered dish dinner where 15% of the people there are diabetics and then look at the dessert table."
Yes,
He's
exactly.
like, "There's not a like, anybody who is trying to help somebody through a recovery program would not do this if they saw the physical consequences of." And so, I okay, do I eat dessert? Yes, I do. Do I drink caffeine? Yes, I do. Like, don't hear like, this is not a us preaching at you, but we're gonna push a little bit because we need to think about these things.
Yeah, and try to think about it in a more holistic light, because I think particularly, let's pick on our own people for a second. Within, theologically conservative Christian circles and culturally conservative Christian circles, certain drugs have a big stigma. They do. But I mean, do you remember, Nathan, for a while, I don't remember when this came to light, but have you ever heard of, I think it's been called variously, Baptist wine, Baptist beer, but do you know what that is?
I don't.
It's NyQuil.
Welch's grape juice.
It's NyQuil. It's NyQuil.
Oh, yeah, okay.
So you have this, so the point there, certain people were, yeah, I would never have beer in my fridge. I'd never have alcohol in my house, but if I wanna, relax and get some sleep, I'll drink some NyQuil. So I'm technically, so you see, that's just basic legalism is all that is. But NyQuil is socially acceptable because this goes in your medicine cabinet. It's not a beer that goes in your fridge. So people who have so trying to expand the conversation for that very reason, there are certain drugs that are stigmatized, there are certain stimulants that are stigmatized. Caffeine isn't. That's true.
Mhm.
In fact, I think caffeine has a certain prestige around it sometimes. If there's a level of intellectual sophistication that can come along with, drinking coffee or tea or whatever it is. But I mean, yeah, can you overuse caffeine? Of course you can. Can you
Mhm.
use it as a stimulant? Yeah, it is a stimulant. Yes, of
Well,
course
so
you can.
I don't use it much, but then when I need it, it really works. Late night drive home from the airport.
Well, I do.
Ooh,
I
buddy.
use it. I use it much. You've been around me, Nathan. I mean, I do. So yeah, guilt. I do drink a lot of coffee. Have since I was 17 years old. So yeah, again, hear us also. We're not,
Well,
hey, we're sages on
no,
mountaintops
no, but
talking to you.
let's stick with the caffeine because I've been talking to my kids about this. They have
Mhm.
um, classmates who, middle school, elementary school, massive amounts of sugar and caffeine
And
just to
are
function
they
through the
are
day,
they
and they're
doing
not,
the energy drinks, the
yeah, and
monsters
not
and all?
really sleeping through the night.
Yeah.
And then that has knock on effects. But I'm saying, look, caffeine is blocking your body, sending you a signal that you're tired and you need to do something about it. So there might be some very strategic moments, but it is an unhealthy thing if you continuously ignore the alarm bells that your body is trying to send you.
Mhm.
So you'd be way better off to have an alertness of like, what does my body need, and just sleep when you need it rather than to mask that. And so the masking element here is the deeper part of the issue. So whether it's your edible or your 2 glasses of wine before bed, what is it that we're trying to dull ourselves from, or what are the other signals that maybe our body physiologically or maybe culturally, sociologically, or spiritually that we're ignoring, that are maybe some little alarm bells that are a gift to say, wait a second, the pace and this and your life is not on a sustainable trajectory here. You
Mhm.
you can you can't just keep putting black electrical tape over all the warning lights on the dash on your car unless you drive a Toyota, which you can do that for at least 100,000 miles. But I'm
Sure.
so the analogy breaks down. But um this stuff works for a time, and then it doesn't.
Mhm.
And I don't think that's uncontroversial or that's controversial.
One big question here for me is why do so many of us want to escape reality on a routine basis? I think that's the Pascalian question here
Well,
because,
okay, but you know
yeah,
the answer to it.
I do. But before we go to that answer, we could tease it out a little bit because Pascal paid a lot of attention to what he called diversions or distractions. And, though he was writing in the 1700s, he was a distinctly modern thinker. And he was talking a lot about people who were, in his day, it was gambling. That was the big one, which is why he came up with the wager as one of his arguments as well. But he was talking about, modern people chasing distractions. But Pascal also then would talk about how our actual condition is one, here's where he sounds almost like a cosmic horror writer. He talks about us marooned on this lonely, tiny little spot in this vast universe, which is so just yawns before us, and the fact that we're hurling inextricably toward the abyss. This is his language. It's like we're hurtling down there, and we're in some sort of a vehicle, and we're kind of just trying to look at funny things on the way, like slot machines. Or now you would just say, take edibles, but we're all gonna die, is what we're saying. He's saying we're mortal, we're fragile, we have this magnificent mind, consciousness, but we're heading towards some sort of oblivion, some sort of eternal fate. And we're all just kind of saying, meh. That's why he's the big guy trying to target indifference and apathy. But so yeah, so the answer is people feel increasing levels of despair. But
Yeah, which I
yeah,
get.
I get it too. I get it.
So
Yeah.
I'm not. In fact, I am awed often by how well people don't despair, given some of the circumstances and visions of the world that they claim to have.
Well, some of
Uh,
those there's a lot of, not a lot, some profound social psychologists like Ernest Becker. You remember Ernest Becker who wrote The Denial of Death? That's a book that deserves to get rediscovered by a new generation. Some TikToker needs to hold that up and say, everyone should read this. Run, don't walk to your local bookstore and get your hands on this. And then it will go viral and suddenly we'll all be reading. But Ernest Becker says that a huge part of our cultural project is involves the denial that we're mortal, involves the denial of death, and it and
mhm,
and we have these immortalization projects that are going on nowadays. And it used to be people would try to build, a successful life, a legacy, something that would outlive them. Now I think it's not, people aren't that ambitious because I think people are so disillusioned and cynical with the world as it is today. I think it's more like, how can I ensure that I feel good most of the time? How can I ensure maximal how can I just maximize pleasure in my life? I mean, that's about the best I'm gonna get in this life. So, I'll work really hard, and then I get these escape hatches from reality, and I'm gonna enjoy the absolute heck out of that. And that's how I'm gonna get through the day. It's really sad when you say it out loud like this, and this is not original to me. I mean, this is David Foster Wallace, the novelist I never shut up about. This is essentially most of what he wrote about in his, certainly in Infinite Jest, but in a lot of his short stories also.
well, because I think you get the dismissive, maybe the Christian judgy version of this, where you look at somebody like, oh, they just can't cope with reality, and you say, oh, hang on a second, let's zoom out and think about what their vision and version of reality is. Put yourself in that situation, and if you're going to subtract out any metaphysical or narrative vision of purpose, meaning, responsibility, and freedom, and health, and destiny, why not? I mean,
Right.
that's
There isn't a whole lot to, yeah, I mean, to speak against that. If you subtract all of those elements that you just mentioned, I mean, I live in the suburbs. Let me describe for you just for a few seconds the suburban wasteland in which I make my home. All right, we've known about it for years. Really great writers have written about it. John Cheever wrote about it. He has short stories that begin with a husband pouring himself a glass of gin at 10 a.m., staring out his window, and he just can't believe that his wife has secretly started dancing in a strip club because her life is empty and she's bored with him and his life is crumbling around him, or a show like Mad Men or a movie like American Beauty. I mean, this has been going on for a long time. I mean, the suburbs, and I live here, and I'm here to tell you there's a high degree of accuracy to all of that. I mean, so much around here revolves, sort of revolves around social performance. And now that I'm in my fourth decade, now it's all about showing off your kids, getting them involved in as many activities as possible and posting about it. So everybody knows how wonderful your kids are, how accomplished they are, how they're honor students, and how they're involved in every club, and they're selling cookies, Girl Scout cookies. They're doing all those things. Yes, I am a success. Well, this is so exhausting and soul
Do you have
crushing.
sustainably harvested wood in your floor in your kitchen,
Abs
Cameron?
Yes, you do. Yes, everything is locally sourced, and of course, you're very healthy. You spend a lot of time in the gym. I'm picking on myself. I go to the gym, I get it, but after a while, this is so soul draining and just exhausting, and there's an emptiness to it as well. If I mean, there's not that some of these things aren't good things. It's good to invest in your kids, take care of your kids, have them do the activities and all of that. But if it's becoming a way of legitimating your existence, wow, now you're in some pretty heavy territory. And so when that's the case, then guess what's your consolation prize for all that? Margaritas with my friends, an edible here, or an all-inclusive resort. I mean, that's those are your escape hatches. From what? From this soul-crushing reality in which you find yourself where you're always performing. Yeah, that's hard.
Well, I'm gonna call you out, Cameron, because I agree, and we're just gonna put a stake in the sand here. You said something to me. You can reword this, but this is the summary of it. You're like, you're like, I got to the point where, I don't know anybody who I think has a happy, meaningful, deep, rich life that I look up to and respect, who takes an edible every day to get over the day. At the end of it, or something to that effect. Of you're like, we're not really seeing the fruit of. So yes, there's the self medication through pick whatever you chemical you want, or screens. I mean, we haven't even talked about the technological use of this, or food. It,
Absolutely.
but it's saying, can we look at some of these as a not as a cutesy, fun wrapped uh treat, but as a indicator to ourselves that maybe we need to slow down and think a little bit more about the broader structures and patterns of our lives.
Yes, I mean, I think you could take that so you can expand it and say, what one way is you could say, "Well, is this stuff really good for you? Is it healthy? Is the net effect really, really good for you?" Or you can think about it a little differently and say, take a person you believe to be this, as far as this side of eternity goes, all things being equal, a genuinely fulfilled, happy, and balanced person. Does that person overeat on a regular basis? Does that person drink gargantuan amounts of caffeine and so that they're effectively acting like a coke fiend all day long? Does that person take edibles on a regular basis to escape reality? Does that person drink 2 to 3 glasses of wine to take the edge off at the end of every day? I mean, I think the obvious answer here is no. These are the right word for what I'm you could use the word indulgences here, you could use the word vices. These All of the things I've named are being used in these instances as vices because they're being used excessively and they are being used specifically to try to mitigate or to try to give you some sort of relief from reality. And so that's a sign, that's a check engine light. That's a warning sign in your soul if that's a habitual. Now, there's a whole separate conversation. There are times of festivity and festival in life. There
Yeah,
are times of feasting.
feasting.
There are times of feasting. The Bible is filled with feasts, but you don't feast every single day. I think the problem with us in America often is, and I mean increasingly this is around the world, but I'm just picking on the nation in which we make our homes, Nathan. We do have this notion, and maybe this is a modern thing where you find something really good. That was really good. And now you think, okay, how can I have that all the time? How can I do that every single day? Rather than, no, there are certain times where this is a time of celebration, a time of feasting. And then there are other times where, yeah, you put your head to the grindstone and you have to get things done. And it's a time of a time a little bit more of scarcity or a time of just more concentration, that kind of thing. We just we're lacking balance when it comes to so much of this.
I was thinking, Cameron, this morning, why did God create the manna so that the people had to go and pick it up when he was miraculously feeding them? I mean, he could have just injected it straight into their stomachs or
Sure.
imparted the calories. Why why did they have to go pick it up? There was a participatory role in God's miraculous intervention in their lives of something that they needed to be part of it in order to see the meaning of it. And the continuous craving to figure out how can I get the most with the least effort is
Yeah.
not a healthy human posture. And run that across multiple categories. Um, Where there's okay, I think sometimes generationally, this it's a hoot just to listen to, like I was visiting helping somebody at a different farm, there's this old guy who was going nuts about this young worker who always had a vape pen in his hand, and it's, "Don't let that guy get in that tractor because it always stinks like," and here he comes with his adult sippy cup. "Look, he's a one-handed guy. He can't do anything because he can't put that vape pen," just you take like an 80-year-old
Sure.
dude who's, like, busted his knuckles all of his life and
Mhm.
then looks at some kid who can't function without puffing on something for 15 seconds and listen to the tirade, which would not be fit for publication, but it is funny. Um, that 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 there is a little bit of a sense of by doing this, what are we deadening ourselves to? But what are the joys that we're missing by not listening to the signals that our body and our community around us is giving us and growing into it? And so, if you're living with this kind of moonscape cultural vision, then yes, I can see how there would be a desire to distract ourselves from that and to deaden our senses to that reality. But the Christian vision is that you don't live on a moonscape. You live on a physical earth that God created and said was good and put humans in it, which he said were very good. And that there really is a like joy and responsibility and freedom and meaning and purpose are all actually really there and available. And so it's not just what are we deadening ourselves. Yeah, I mean, it's that sense of there's it cuts both ways in the argument for of like, what am I
Mhm.
forfeiting because of this that I can't see because my vision of reality is too low?
Yeah. I think there are so many aspects to this that we can still explore here on the podcast because it's a big what I hope, Nathan, in as we've talked about this, is that people haven't gotten any kind of a legalistic impression from this, but have rather seen this conversation expanded.
Well, because there is a there, but the yeah, so it's not legalistic. So if um if it's just categorically the case that if I don't sleep more than 3 hours a night, that my response time is less than if I had been drinking significant amounts of alcohol. Like, that's not legalism. That's
Mhm.
pointing out this is the way that your body works.
Right.
Like, that's that. I'm not even. We're not even making a Christian point here. We're just
Mhm.
saying, look at the. I mean, and there's deep harmony between them. But I think we are saying that God created your body to send you certain signals and messages, and He put people in the world around you to send you certain signals and messages. And if instead of looking at those warning lights, you're just trying to plaster over them, that is not honoring God, it's not honoring your own body, and it's not honoring the wisdom of the gift of the relationships of the people that you have around you. So, yeah, we don't want to be legalistic here, but you and I have both talked about the categories and the tendencies where we're prone to do this. So, this is not a we thank you, God, we're not like these people. We're saying this is the human condition. And sometimes we need somebody to kind of smack us out of it to say, is this really a sustainable long-term pattern that is for the flourishing that God desires to see in my life? Or am I just telling myself a story that I do this because I think it's medicinally good for me? Ah,
Mhm.
here's your reminder. Ponder these things.
Well, we hope you continue to ponder these things. And thank you, as always, for hanging with us through this roving conversation. on what we both think is very important
We'll be back on this one.
material. So, yeah, we'll be back on this one for sure. But you've been listening to Thinking Out Loud, a podcast where we think out loud about current events and Christian hope.
Thanks for listening to Thinking Out Loud. If you'd like to learn more about what we do, book Nathan or Cameron, or if you'd like to support us financially, whether through a one-time donation or on a monthly basis, you can do so on the donate page at www.toltogether.com. That's toltogether.com. And please consider leaving us a 5-star rating and sharing this content with your friends. It really does help.